All right, we are recording now. Welcome to the first Harvester podcast. I haven't thought of a name yet for the podcast, but we'll come up with that. So we're interviewing Wade Nelson today. He's a legend in the Canadian BMX world.
Okay, thank you. It's kind.
And first I wanted to ask you, what are you doing in Toronto because you don't live here anymore?
No, I left 6 months ago to take up a job as a professor at the University of New Brunswick. And my classes finished a week ago, and it was time for a road trip to get some riding in and eat some yummy vegan food in the big city. So came back.
Nice. First of all, I know you like to ride skate parks and Flatland, but what is your favorite riding style? Starting from the beginning too. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's 9 things, but okay. Let's see. At this point, at 48 and a half years old, having ridden since 1980, so it'll be 40 years in a couple weeks.
Wow.
The most important thing is getting with friends. So the actual bike riding is as important as getting together with your friends and enjoying each other's company around something that you've been doing since you were kids. So it brings you back to being 12 and innocent and pure, but if you do it by yourself, at this stage of my life, it's not as interesting. So one of the things I've been thinking is if I stay in New Brunswick and be a teacher until I retire, I will need my own skateboard park / bike park. And I think, I'm going to buy an old church, because you can buy old churches in St. John for inexpensive, and I'm going to have a cement pool installed inside at the main floor. That's what I think I should do. And I think that'll be great. I'll really enjoy that. I'll get to ride my bike and skateboard, but it won't be the same as being somewhere where other people do it. So, for example, last night I was riding Joyride with Jamie Delaney and Chris Silva, and as much fun as we were having riding, it was really that it was 3 people enjoying each other's company while riding. That's the most important thing. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So, I can ride Flatland, I can ride ramps. I suppose I could ride street, although Bunny Hops and I are distant cousins at this point. I do it, but I don't want to, if that makes sense. What happens when you blow out your back young is most of us that have been doing it for a long time, it's not enjoyable to land flat. So the sort of riding that I think that you do when I've seen your videos and things, even riding a ledge that's 2 feet tall and then hopping off 180, I don't even want to fall off something 2 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to land on transition as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Also, once you have the muscle memory to ride vert and mini ramps and things like that, it's actually much safer and much more enjoyable. Yesterday I was riding the vert ramp at Joyride just enough to get up and double peg grind and ride away, and you don't feel that. And you think, it's 10 feet high, how are you going to get up there? No, you just carve real high, lay the pegs down, ride off. It's actually easier on the body to ride a vert ramp than it is to ride a 2-foot ledge. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So you have that to look forward to in your old age.
Okay.
Was that enough?
That's good.
Where I came from?
Yeah, where did you come from?
Well, when I started BMXing, there were only 2 kind of bicycles. You either had a 10-speed or a BMX bike. So if you had fun on your bikes, it was most likely going to be on a BMX. There wasn't the option of mountain bikes quite yet in a mainstream sort of way. We're about 5 years away from that, by mid-80s definitely. But if you went to a bike store, you either bought the practical 10-speed that had gears, or you bought a BMX bike. And BMX bikes were really cool, and it wasn't so much an outsider thing back then. It became that 10 years later, but it was just the thing that you did until you were 16 and got a car. So a lot of the folks that you sell to, the nostalgic 80s folks that are building up the old bikes, they quit when they were 16 or 17 or 18 and started modeling adult behaviors, which is understandable. You get a car and you start dating and you replace having fun and getting exercise with partying and drinking and such. And so when they hit their mid-40s and their midlife crises, they want bikes that remind them of freedom, right? That makes sense. I get that. Some of us didn't quit, and so we've been through 30 more years of bicycles. So I do have my nostalgic affection for certain brands and bicycles, even though I know it's kind of silly.
Yeah.
So I have 2 bikes that have PK Ripper stickers on them, and I have a Haro bike with mid-80s stickers on it, and I almost wanted to take that lavender Trickstar that you had here last year for that client of yours.
Yeah.
I know they're not as good of bikes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But there's still something that pulls me to them. But by the late 80s, I was sort of over that stuff. My dear friends that were obsessed with bash guards and just got their bash guards in the last couple of years, they're all 5 years younger than me. So their most impressionable age was around the time that the bash guards were released, say from 89 to 93, 94, something like that.
Yeah.
And as neat as bash guards are to me, they don't grab me in the way that a Hutch Trickstar does. Or, for example, Matt Hoffman, who's I think the world of, he's a year younger than me, and so he's not a pro I look up to, although he's arguably the best pro that ever was for all the reasons you would think. My favorite pro ever was Woody Itzen, who was a Flatlander that rode mostly through the 80s and then went on to the business side of things. And so that might seem silly to other people, but I was 14 when I picked my pro, right? And now I don't pick pros because I don't. It'd be weird for a 48-year-old to look at 21-year-olds and look up to them. It's odd. I'm impressed. Absolutely. I watch Chad Curley comes to mind. I think if I was a modern street rider, and Courage Adams, is that his name? The nose wheelie. Yeah, amazing. And Mike Gray, who's local. I could watch Mike Gray edits all day. And I know a lot of the younger local pros as well, but I don't have that same sort of worship as I did when I was a kid, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started riding in 1980, and at that point, a BMX bike, bicycle motocross, you could still have banana seats, like long seats on your bicycle. So my first BMX bike was a Rally Tracker, which looked sort of like a really cheap version of it had 2 down tubes that wrapped around the bottom bracket, and then it had a banana seat. So it looked like one of those motorcycle-like Yamahas, but without the plastic tanks.
Okay.
But that's a BMX bike. And I remember thinking, in 82, I got a Rally Supercross, which was my first double diamond hardtail bike with what we would call a 10-speed seat almost, like a single seat. And I thought, I finally have a BMX bike. But looking back, I realized that, no, those other bikes counted as well.
I know that twin tube thing that you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I saw one in Vancouver a few years ago at Ride On Don's shop. And it's one of those things where you know it's irrational, but you want it. And if Don would have sold it to me for $100 at the time or whatever, I probably would have. I didn't really follow up on it. Like, oh, great, now I have it. Now you're carrying it around with you for the rest of your life. So I got to watch that sort of stuff. So
what bike came after that?
Oh, well, there've been 45 or 50 at this point. I have a list. It's part of the compulsion of being an academic is you make lists of these things. It went Rally Tracker, Rally Supercross, and then my mom, we were sort of like not white trash, but working class folks with aspirations to middle class. And the rich people that went to my elementary school and high school, they would get a PK Ripper or something like that. And we knew that we weren't getting that because we didn't have the money. We would get a Norco or a Rally. But my mom sold some property that was left to her, and the money came through in 84, and I went to buy the Hutch Pro Raider, which was a Taiwanese bike when the companies were first going to Taiwan. At first they went to Japan for manufacturing, and then to make them inexpensive, a couple companies went to Taiwan. And the Hutch Pro Raider looked like a Hutch, but it was all copies of stuff. So you didn't get DX pedals, you got DX style pedals, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I went to the store, Local Motion, which was the best bike shop in British Columbia in the 80s, with $350, I want to say, that I was allowed to spend on a brand new Taiwanese bike. And someone had brought in a PK Ripper to trade in that had everything. So it was a very custom bike that had bullseye hubs and CW bars and all the little things that cost a lot more money. So I left for $350 getting a PK Ripper. So I went from rally, and suddenly I had
That's
a
awesome.
PK Ripper. Yeah, for a 13-year-old.
What color was it?
Silver, polished, I guess, with blue decals,
Cool.
with chrome parts. I can still see most
Did you
of
break it?
No, I didn't have a chance to break it. It was stolen.
Oh, okay.
Back then, this would have been 84,
Very
85.
common.
Yes, the bicycles, at least where I was living in Langley, British Columbia, were getting stolen, and I was too dumb to take care of the bike better. So that bike got stolen, and I found out about home insurance. I didn't know anything about this. I'm 13. My mom had replacement value insurance if something in your house got stolen, and bikes counted. So she had to put a deposit of maybe $100, a deductible, I guess it was. But the value for replacement, not that I would get $350 for a used bike, the value of replacement was $1,200, which was more money than I could imagine at that point. So I got to piece together a real Hutch, an American Hutch that was black chrome with white Mike Buff Z rims. Sorry?
Trickstar?
No, it was a Hutch Pro Racer.
Oh, okay.
They didn't have a Trickstar at the time. A Hutch Trickstar existed at the time, but I picked what was in the shop. So they had a black chrome Hutch. Hutch was always about being chrome up until the colors came in 85. But I got a black chrome one with a uni seat. Have you seen uni seats?
Yeah.
It's funny because the modern seats that the park riders use, not the pivotals, but the ones that are stuck together, they're basically uni seats. It had a uni seat and it had Hutch freestyle bars with the two crossbars in chrome. As I said, Mike Buff Z rims and white was a brand new color then. So up until this point, we had gold, red, blue, black, and silver. For about 5 years, those were the colors that were available. And then in 84, white became a thing. And then in 85, there's 5 or 6 new colors. You had Tough Wheels suddenly came in green, orange, lavender. White was the year before. They had gray, they had baby blue. And then Hutch themselves put out Purple Rain, which was lavender, which is my color. That's the one I never got over. Candy Apple Blue, Candy Apple Red, a baby blue, and Hutch Pink. So all of the colors just sort of exploded in 85. But I got a black Hutch Pro Racer, and it had maybe the first, you know what a POTS mod is, if I say POTS mod? So the front brake cable going through the stem. I had probably one of the first ones in Canada at the time because I worked at the good shop. And I think we modified a tough neck with an ACS bolt. It was so new that you'd buy a separate bolt and you drill out your stem. And then I don't think that worked very well. And then I got a Redline forklifter stem, which worked, which was cool. But by worked, I mean it worked for the next 8 months until that bike was stolen. Because I'm still an idiot kid and getting my bike stolen. And then with that one, we got house insurance again, and I built a green 1985 Haro Master, which is, for me, the sort of pinnacle 80s color. There's an ad that was on the back of the magazines for about 6 months straight.
What year was that?
85. 85. So it's painted front to back. It wasn't the half chrome that comes out in 86. And my friend, poor boy Steve, who's also obsessed with the same color.
Yeah.
Have you seen his... he has a walker shirt that it looks like you're an old person walking.
Yeah, with the bar pad.
Yeah, with the bar pad, and it's neon green. That's because he's obsessed with that bike, and as am I. That and the lavender Trickstar. So I had that for a while, and then at some point I decided, and this is about 5 years early, that I didn't need double top tubes. Because we thought we needed frame platforms back then.
Yeah.
And I wanted a chrome bike because it said, and I guess this is 85 or 86. I thought I needed a chrome bike so it wouldn't scratch, I think is what it was, which is practical, which is weird for a kid. And so I got a GT Mach 1 frame and swapped out all my freestyle parts on it. So I was riding a race frame with all freestyle-y sort of parts on it. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, I could go on and on. I had a Diamondback Mike Dominguez bike that I got from Caps in Langley, which was a big bike chain back then. And then GTs and like on and on and on and on.
So then Rad came out around that time?
Rad came out in 86, and it was in and out of the theaters so fast that I didn't even get a chance to see it. I think it was in the theaters for 2 weekends. That's it. And I don't think I was on top of it enough to even know it was coming out. I definitely saw Rad for the first time as a video rental.
Yeah. Is it true that it was only available as a VHS rental?
It's never been DVD.
But never for sale as a VHS, only a rental copy?
Oh, I don't know. Where did I get... I do have a copy. I got a brand new one in around 92. But I think my girlfriend at the time, maybe she convinced someone to buy it. See, the way it used to work with video rentals is they would initially sell them for $100 and something a piece for a VHS for 3 months or something like that to protect the video rental market, and then they would flip and you could buy them for $25 or $30. So I don't know what my girlfriend paid for it. But what we were all doing back then is renting Rad, which is not a good film. It's really not. But the opening and closing credits were the first time that, for a lot of us, we saw moving freestyle.
Yeah.
So we would see sequences in the magazines, and you'd try and figure out how it would work, but you actually saw people moving. Video. It's hard to explain now with, instant video and phones, et cetera, but Rad was important that way more than anything else.
So did you make a copy of it?
I think I had... we probably hooked up 2 VHS machines, and I taped just the intro credits and the closing credits. Could not care less about the movie.
Yeah.
And I can quote you the movie word for word all the way through. And I went to the 25th anniversary in Calgary. So it's an important part of the culture.
Yeah.
But the film is not good.
Yeah.
It's not. It's important, but it's not good.
Yeah.
And I've met a lot of the folks in the film over the years, and they're really approachable and super cool. And But yeah, I mean, the other thing that came out back then was E.T., which is 82, I believe.
Yeah.
And they had a big BMX scene in that, the flying over the moon thing. And Bob Haro and Seppi Mays and a handful of other folks were stunt people on that. So I would have seen E.T. before I saw Rad,
for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it wasn't freestyle, it was just guys riding around, which counts. It might be all that matters, really, is guys ripping around and ladies ripping around. So, other films. BMX Bandits I didn't see until probably the 2000s.
Yeah.
It in my world, it didn't show up.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'd rather watch BMX Bandits than Rad.
Really?
As a film, yeah. It's fun. It's silly, but it's fun. I mean, I own both. You have to own both.
Yeah.
In a sense, so.
So did you start seeing BMX die in the late 80s?
Well, looking back, what happened is 87 was huge, and then 88, it sort of died. But I only would have been 17 in 88, so I didn't see it in the same way. Mm-hmm. The guys that are 5 years older than me would have been more mature and saw what was going on. I started competing in 87 in Flatland, in August of 87, and I competed in 88, 89, etc. Where were the contests?
Yeah, what were they and where were they?
The first contest I went to was in Victoria, British Columbia, so I was 16 and had a driver's license and took the 72 Toyota Corolla wagon over on the ferry, and I met all of these Canadian pros or important people all on the same day. So I met Darren Wong, who I'd heard about, but I hadn't met before, Mel Gooder, Ron Mercer, Jason Hollister, Rob Dodds, and they were pro-ish, most of those folks. And this was my first contest, so I would have entered whatever the beginner class was called. I don't remember it at the moment. But it was my first time going to a contest like this. And then after that, there were contests in the North American Freestyle Association, it was called. And it went from Oregon up through Washington. Once we dipped into Idaho, and then in British Columbia. And so we had our own contest series for 88, 89, and the start, 90, 88, 89, 90, and a little bit into 91. So we had our own little world of competition. And sometimes people would come up from California. So Gabe Weed came up from California. Eric Emerson came up from California. And we had the people in the Seattle area and Portland. And then sometimes the guys from Edmonton and Calgary would come up. So it was sort of that corner of the world. So we had that going on. And I worked my way up pretty quickly. You have beginner, intermediate, expert, and then pro. And our pro level wasn't the same as it was everywhere else, but it was the best that we had in our region. So the only my real turning pro moment was 1990, and it was when I was a Flatlander. And it's because I had competed in 18 and over expert, I think 5 times and won 3. And it was sort of, well, I guess I have to go up. It wasn't that I thought I was pro, but I got to ride with Steve Roy and Jason Brown and Jamie McIntosh and Greg Axford and Todd Schneider, a guy named Matt Bergman, all the best guys at the time. And I could hang, but I mean, the truth of my competitive career was that I would pull everything because I wasn't trying anything that was beyond. I wasn't pushing it. Does that make sense? And every once in a while I would try and push it a little bit, and I would pull tricks that I'd never pulled before in my run for the first time. So I had no nerves, and I was such a performer that I could get up and I was also smart enough not to try the hardest things that I couldn't pull. So Jamie McIntosh, he's one of my very, very favorite human beings, dear brother, friend of mine. He would go out and try the thing he hadn't even learned yet, pushing the pro class, and miss it 6 times in a row, and then not do well in the contest. And I, who was 1/5 the talent of Jamie, would go out and pull my easier tricks and then place above him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's an odd situation that every once in a while someone says, "Oh, you were a pro." It's like, kinda,
yeah.
But I guess it's 30 years ago that this happened. So
moving a little bit into the 90s now that
sure.
we look like we've done that. Would you say that the 90s was a dark age?
No. The 90s was the best age. It was so good because all the people that were into it because it was the cool thing to do, but were distracted by being young grown-ups, left.
For sure.
A lot of the top sponsored guys, as soon as they weren't sponsored, left. So all that was left were the people that didn't care. They just wanted to ride. And it felt like, and if you ask the people from back then, that there was only about 100 of us left in North America. It really felt like it was that small. And so when the first year of the Matt Hoffman contest, the BS contest, the first contest was at Jeff Phillips Skate Park in Texas. And people drove from all over North America. These, like, now you talk about crews, right?
Yeah.
Your gang of friends would pile into a van and drive from Calgary to Dallas. Or we flew, a couple of us flew, but people were coming from all over North America. And it was this 100 people that were left that were serious about it. And Matt and Steve Swope and those folks made it happen and kept it going during the dark years. But the dark years were so fun. People like you're a huge Dave Mira fan, right?
Yeah.
When I met Mira, he was awesome, but he was just one of the guys. So you wouldn't have this sort of distance.
Yeah.
You'd be hanging out at the restaurant the night before, or there was no distance during those 5 years or so.
For sure.
You know, you'd roll up to a contest, and all the big names from the magazines weren't they were better than you at their tricks, but they weren't better humans or elevated. Yeah. So
sounds like a good time.
It was really good. And from, say, the end of Freestylin' magazine, which is 89, and then Go happens for a few more years until 92, Go the Rider's Manual, and then the period right up to the first Extreme Games in Rhode Island before it was called X Games, which is summer of 95. Those dark times were so amazing. Yeah. And part of it is you look back on it with a bit of nostalgia, but imagine going to an event knowing everybody. Awesome. Or the person you don't know, you just walk right up and say, hey.
Yeah.
It also is the case that, and a lot of other people have said this over the years that I've seen in other podcasts, etc., you would be driving through a town and you saw someone on a BMX bike and you hit the brakes and turned around and you met this person because that's your new best friend. You didn't get to hang out with BMXers that were part of your clique. You're a BMXer. That's it. Of course. Yeah. You know, and so the dark times were good.
For sure.
If that makes sense. There's no money, but that shouldn't have been what it was about anyways.
For sure. Yeah.
And the people that ended up taking over the industry, like the rider-own folks, they were part of that 100. Yeah. Right? So I met Steve Crandall when him and Mike Tagg and that crew were quite young, because I think they're a few years younger than me, because our common friend Toast, Mark Johnson, told us when we left Vancouver and drove through Seattle, we should check out these young kids, the Fat Bald Men, right? Or the Baco folks that became the props folks, et cetera, they were all part of that 100 people. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So those people took over, which was cool. I mean, it became a bit corrupted because after the Extreme Games, a lot of money came into it, et cetera, which has been good in a lot of other different ways. But that the Dark Ages, that 5, 6, 7 years, depending on where you put it, those were great times, absolutely great times.
How was it in Canada? Because you've been speaking a lot about the U.S.
Oh, well, I was in British Columbia, and so I knew the folks as far as Winnipeg, I guess. So a couple of folks from Winnipeg moved to Vancouver, Ken Paul and Kevin Radowitz, the Warlord, as we called him. And then eventually later, 92, 93, Asado and Enns and Dave Hawthorne went on a road trip when they were 16, 17 years old to Vancouver. So we had as far out as there, we knew some people. West Tully we knew about out there. And then in Regina, Saskatoon came later. Edmonton was a good scene. Calgary was a good scene. And then we also, I sort of include Washington State as part of that because the contests also included those people and we're good friends. So Shed Johnson, for example, from Goods, etc. When I met him in the early 90s, he was just, like a kid coming up to one of our contests in Nelson, BC. Have you heard about the Nelson contest? It's not my last name version, but the Nelson contest? Yeah, so in 93, Rob Siggety, who rode for several companies, including GT and Two Hip, etc., rode the X Games. Wonderful human being. I miss him. He's not that he's gone. I just can't find him right now. I'm looking for him. Rob really wanted me and others to come visit him in Nelson, BC. And he used to write me letters. I still have every one of them. Handwritten letters that say, now we've got a 4-foot ramp and now we've got this. It was as if a little kid was writing a Christmas list of the ramps we have. And he was just begging me without begging me to come ride.
That's so cool.
So in 92, Darren Bolton and I, who's another Vancouver rider, we went on a sort of a fact-finding mission after eventually I got a VHS tape from Rob showing the park. We've got to try that. So we drove 9 hours to Nelson, BC, checked it out, thought it was rad. So, we're going to come back again. And then the next year, Rob got quite bold and with the local folks organized a contest. And it brought people if you look at a map, Nelson is sort of equidistant between Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, etc. It's sort of in the middle. And so all of these people that we knew congregated, made it to Nelson, and we had the first of 8 contests that we did in Nelson. So the first one I had nothing to do with other than I showed up. And then after that I helped Rob and the local skateboard park, which was called The Garage. Now it's the Nelson and District Youth Center. And we did that for over 10 years. We did it 8 times. And we'd have hundreds of people enter. And I think one year we had 600 prizes for 100 people. Because I was shameless in asking for stuff. And then the trick once we got them there is we would call it a contest, but it was really a jam that everybody got a chance to shine. So we'd put everybody in the same class. So if Miron was there, Masato and those folks, they were in the same class as someone who's just starting. They all got their moment of glory. You cheered for them as if they were the top pros. And at the end, we announced that everybody tied for fourth, except for these 3 people. And then they didn't get any money or anything. They just got a T-shirt. And then the prizes came out of a hat. So it was all very equal. Because I even when I was running contests for so long, I didn't like sport or competing. So I corrupted it, if that makes sense. So the Nelson contest brought us together sometimes twice a year. It was super rad.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're talking about doing it again. We haven't told anybody yet. That's almost exclusive, but there's a handful of us that want to do it. So we got to find Rob Siggety. And I can't really speak to other things about that yet, but there are people that want to do it.
That's awesome.
But I can't really speak to what was going on east of Winnipeg. Yeah. So I have a lot of friends that have been riding that long, but I didn't know them until the late 90s, if that makes sense.
Any kind of zines or anything in that time?
Ken Paul had Backdoor Zine out of Winnipeg, which I think did about 10 issues. Who else had a zine? I had Wade Zine. Of course I did, because full of myself. And I did six
when
issues.
Did you do that?
89 for about 2 years. Something like that. Cool. I still have them all. We did zines. My PhD's on BMX. You know this, right?
Yeah.
So to me, media is a big part of how this all works. So magazines, for a while, you would have to wait a month to get news that was 3 months old, right? Because publication lag times, etc. Zines you would whip up before a contest and hand them out, and you got sort of new news that way, which was really cool. Plus, you're handing it to someone else, which is rad. The other thing we had was videos. We had VHS videos. I don't know if you've ever seen the Jason Brown videos before. Does that bring up? Oh, I'll have to send some to you. So Jason Brown, who's a pro flatlander out of the Edmonton area, Sherwood Park, I believe is what we would call it. He moved to Vancouver in 88 or so and was one of the top pro riders for the next 10 years or so. We just lost him a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. And he made a series of videos called Canadians A. So the first one came out in 1990, then 91, and I think there's about 5 or 6 altogether. And the first one had parts, it was very primitive. And it was, you'd tape over a couple months and edit together on 2 VHS machines and then put it out. We're inspired by plywood hoods at the time. And so, you need to see that.
Yeah, okay.
That's fun. I have the first part in the first video.
Oh, cool.
And you think that's rad, but that means I was the worst of the 6 people. Because I'm a friend, I'm in it. Not because I'm rad, because I'm a friend. So I get the first part, but it also sort of clears the palette for the good guys that are coming.
Yeah. Was Jamie McIntosh in
Jamie
that?
McIntosh would absolutely be in that. Greg Axford would be in that. Eventually, Brent Oswald, who's a vert rider from Edmonton, would be in that. Miron would be in it at some point. Jason Brown. And then these happened sporadically in the early 90s. And then in the 96, 97, 98, there were 3 really good ones professionally done. And in those, you'll find Paul Buchanan and Chris Donahue and some other folks from the East that made it out West.
So before Chase and everything, were those the media? Was that the media?
Canadian media?
Yeah. Was there anything else?
I'm sure there was. I mean, Ed Vandermolen did a zine called Mob Zine, I think. He's from here. He goes to Old Folks Night. He rides a cruiser. He does Cruiser Revolution. You seen that before?
Yeah.
Super good dude. There's probably tons of zines. I don't want to misrepresent the rest of Canada because I was really just on one side for so long. What else did we have? Various videos. Chase doesn't show up until 99 and only lasts till 2003, which we were glad to have it, but it's only 19 issues. Do you have a complete set of Chase?
I gave away all my magazines.
Really?
Big mistake.
I just counted mine last week.
Oh, yeah?
After having given away about 300 or 400, I still have 735, wow. Including 2 full sets of Chase.
Wow. I have one autograph by like some Kevin Salmon and some people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't seen Kevin forever. Hope he's doing well.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is he around?
Yeah, definitely. I've asked him
to do this?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds rad.
I don't know if he wants to, but I'm going to try to ask him again.
That would be super rad. I'll watch that.
Okay, so after when the X Games started, did anything change for you guys?
For the Canadians?
Yeah, or just in general, was it more...
I'll tell you the first time we went to the Extreme Games. That was a road trip.
Oh, that's cool.
So Basic Bikes is going on. And Basic Bikes initially was, you've probably heard this story before, there were leftover standards, Standard Bike Company bikes. And I think the line from Rick Moliterno, and I'm not saying he's wrong, he would know, is that they were rejected standards. And so there were these bikes that existed that Gardner, who made them, I think, was trying to get rid of. And Darcy and Cecil, when they were 20 or 21 years old, something like that, got a chance to get these frames. They got one for each of them, and then their friends wanted them, and that's sort of how it went. You'd put different stickers. There's, it's not a new scheme.
Sure.
You know about Dirt Brothers?
Skyway.
Yeah, Skyway TAs with red line forks.
Wilkerson Airlines, too. Or
Or
they were just, like, defective to begin with.
Oh, that I don't know. I'm not speaking to that because I don't have any knowledge of a Wilkerson Airlines going that way or being restickered.
They were like cut up because the sprocket was hitting the frame.
Oh, maybe, yeah, but I don't think they're recycled and someone else tried to sell them, though. I don't know that story.
No.
If you know something, I don't know. Ron Wilkerson's a good guy, so. What were we talking about?
Basic.
Oh, Basic. Okay, so then Basic happens for about 5 or 6 years, probably. And the summer of 95, I'm living in Montreal, going to graduate school. And my friends from Vancouver fly out, rent a minivan, and 7 or 8 of us jump in the minivan, and we drive to the first Extreme Games, and we don't know what it's going to be.
Wow. Is that the first one ever?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So we were there, and that would have
so
been Cease Milligan from Basic. Darcy wasn't there. Davis Soto is in the vehicle. No one knew who he was yet. Yannick Dubois, who made the French videos. You ever seen the Quebec videos? Beer Sex and BMX. That was Highrollers 5.
No.
No? Oh, we got to get you some videos. He was there to document things. I think Greg Axford was there. I was there. Rob Siggety was there. So we had a whole Canadian crew. We jumped in the van that had no bike rack, but 7 bikes tied to the roof.
Holy.
Just tied. So when you get the window opens up and there's that little bit, we get a rope through that and tie it to the roof. 7 bikes and all the gear.
Do you have a photo of that?
Yeah, there's in the Beer Sex and BMX video, there's footage of us doing this sort of thing. So we get down to the first Extreme Games in Rhode Island. Nobody knows what to make of it. It was really goofy at first.
Yeah.
They had freestyle bungee jumping the first year where a guy just sat in a kayak and they pushed him off and he won $10,000 for being pushed off something in a kayak. It's like, oh, is this what this is? And they wouldn't let the BMXers ride street the first year. There was vert and there was dirt. And Jay Miron won the very first Extreme Games dirt contest, which is pretty rad.
That's cool.
And a blue Sparkle McNeil, if I remember correctly. I might be making that up, but I feel like that could be a thing. No, not McNeil, you're right. But was it Schwinn? Oh, he was freshly on Schwinn, but he had a stickered... Oh, he had his... You ever seen the Hoffman Bikes Jay Miron signature frame that never came out? Had a built-in beer opener.
Oh, wow.
Like, you know, when you have the top tube that goes past the seat tube, and
Yeah.
there's like a little plug there.
That's cool.
His had a beer opener in it.
He wasn't on a basic.
No, they put Schwinn stickers. My memory is, and I could be wrong, and I apologize to Jay if I get this wrong, but my memory is he just got signed to Schwinn in '95 and put a set of Schwinn stickers on his Hoffman bike.
Cool.
And they only had the one prototype. And then after that, he would have got a Schwinn. He never rode for basic. He rode basic parts, but not a basic frame. So
how many basic frames were there to begin with? And was
different
there more
models?
Runs? Were there more runs after?
Well, there's the first batch of standards that were recycled. And then at some point, they were getting them made in Canada, in Vancouver, with some changes. And then they were working on Taiwanese frames at one point before it ended. So I think there was a batch of Andrew Farriss frames that were Taiwanese.
Were you friends with him?
Andrew, yeah. Andrew's a wonderful human being. Do you know what he's up to now?
No.
He's a very high-end car modifying guy. I don't know. I don't have the right language for it, but it's like he gets an old rusted VW.
Yeah, restores it.
Yeah, and makes it into a $150,000 car,
Wow.
like show car.
Cool.
He's so talented, but he always was. He had that drive.
Yeah.
So you've probably only ever seen videos of him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Andrew had more. I mean, the Flatlanders of that era were, what's the word you would use? Focused. You know, they were a different breed of person, and I respect that a lot. I couldn't do it. I had to leave Flatland when I realized I was practicing instead of riding.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like it was such a leap. You know what it was? We're talking about the videos before. Canadians A comes out, and it's got everything that I can do. All my best stuff is in my little 2-minute part riding to the song Rain by The Cult, if I remember correctly. And then it was done. It's like, oh, I have to learn all new tricks? No. And I had a part in the second video that was mostly recycled stuff, but that was it. I was pretty much done with Flatland 90, 91, something like that, as striving to be good at it. And then I sort of started over with ramps and worked my way back up from intermediate, etc. Why was I talking about that?
Andrew Farriss.
Oh, Andrew Farriss. Andrew Farriss that's excellent. You're paying attention. I like this. Andrew had a drive that was almost like autistic spectrum in the best possible way. Like he got things done because he tuned in everything else out of his life. You know, he would rent a warehouse space for months in the winter, and that's what he did. He went and he rode Flatland. So he won, if I remember correctly, he won the World Championships 2 years in a row, and for Amazing Flatland, that would have been in the best way derivative of the other heroes at the time, like next level versions of things that came before. But at some point he went and hibernated, that's not the right term, but sort of woodshedded. That's what they would say in guitar, right? You just block everything off and you go do it. And he came out and he was doing all of the earliest street bunny hop stuff that people do now. So he would do a quick rock walk to rolling backwards, like 180, and pop what we would call half cab tail whips, right? Yeah. He was doing that in 98, years before the street guys were doing them. And he would take that sort of stuff to street too. Some of the videos from back then show him doing sort of more bunny hops and stuff, because him and Jason Enns and Asado were like tight. And so Andrew would go ride with them doing stuff. Yeah, Andrew's wonderful.
So cool. Yeah.
Oh, he's rad. He's super rad.
So was there any more to the story about the X Games?
The first one?
Yeah.
What happened at the first X Games? We snuck our way in. Oh, I still have it. I went to the first two. The first year I got rock climbing judge pass. I've been charming in the past. I wouldn't say I'm now, but I've been charming, and somehow I got the ESPN people to give me a rock climbing judge pass. And with that, my crew of people could get into the good parking lots, get into the good parts, because we just kept handing it back and forth, right? We'd go into the food and get the good food.
For free?
Yeah. So I think the first time I hung out with Taj Mahalik, and we're not friends, just acquainted, was in the tent at the first Extreme Games having veggie burgers.
Wow.
But it was because I'd gotten this pass. And then the next year I went, in a different part of Rhode Island, but still in Rhode Island, and it was called X Games for the first time. And I got a VIP all access pass so I could go anywhere. And then I stopped going. So I think we're at 25 now, so I've missed a few.
Yeah.
But I went to the first two, which was interesting.
Awesome.
My interesting story, and I don't even know if this is right anymore, but this is how I remember it. The second X Games, the second year it was, and the first year it was called the X Games, Nike was a sponsor. And Nike didn't want anybody wearing shoes that weren't Nike in the event. And everybody had shoe sponsors that weren't Nike. And they were, or ESPN had maybe misunderstood this. I don't know. Thank you. And they were asking people to duct tape over the logos on their shoes. And they handed everybody who signed up a pair of the latest Nike whatevers. So you came in to sign up, and they would give you a bag full of Nike clothes.
It's the start of the corporation.
Yeah, exactly. So do you remember Nike 6.0 around your time? Yeah. When I heard that, and I don't say this is necessarily the truth, but what I heard was, oh, you tried 5 times to get into this culture. This will be the 6th time.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of resistance to outside sponsorship in the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting to watch the corporations and a television network and the riders try and negotiate what it would be. Right? Mm-hmm. And the money hadn't really arrived yet. So.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. So, did you still live, how long did you live in Montreal for?
10 years. I moved there in 94 to start my master's degree, and I left in 97, and then I came back in 2000 and stayed until 2007. So I was there for 2 chunks.
Did you ever go, not fast forwarding at all, but did you ever go to the Ugly Ass Bikes?
Oh, yeah. I just saw Jason Herman, who's the co-owner of 514 BMX. We were in Montreal 3 days ago. And Liam Mulrooney, who was the center of that scene 15 years ago, he's out of town doing some sort of airplane thing. I don't understand. But he's got a proper grown-up job.
Flight simulator.
Is that what it is?
I think so. Or a space shuttle simulator.
Something impressive. Anyways.
Yeah, that guy is... he was a big deal back then in Montreal.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I was already 20 years older than the 15-year-old at the time.
And he was
just
probably about around my age.
He was a kid, probably. I don't even know how old he is. I mean, Jason told me he was 30 the other day.
He's probably a little bit older than that.
Yeah. But, yeah, so Ugly Ass Bikes was super fun. I was busy doing my doctorate at the time and wasn't really leading things anymore. I mean, I put on the King of Quebec series. Did you ever hear about that?
No.
So for a couple of years with the help of David Berube, who had a Central Park, was a skateboard park in Trois-Rivières.
I was going to ask you, is that the same as South Park? Or
no, South Park was in Longueuil, Quebec.
Oh, okay.
So it was just over the water in Montreal.
And also the
Boucherville
the
Park.
Mahal.
And the Taz with a Z. The Taj Mahal used to be downtown Montreal. I got to ride that once or twice, and then they closed it because the building or that area was being taken over to build the Quebec National Library. Oh. And so the new Taz has been up for maybe a dozen years now, something like that. They were closed on Thursday when we were going to go by and try and ride it. But did you ever meet Pedro dos Santos?
Crusher guy? No.
Yeah.
No.
So I had dinner with Pedro 2-3 nights ago. So I've known him for 25 years this year. And I love him. Love him. It's good to see him. Crusher with a K, right? Yeah. The brand that's owned by Dylan now.
Yeah.
I was on the cover of the first Crusher catalog.
Cool.
Probably only because at first Pedro made 2 pair of shin guards. I got one, he got one, and he had a shot of me doing something with Crusher shin guards on. So that's a Pedro thing. Montreal.
Before we continue with Montreal, I have to, before I forget about it, and I just want to know about the SST thing. And your
Oh,
job
SST?
there and when you were in California.
So I'd said before that Woody Itson was my favorite pro.
Mhm.
So this goes back a little bit. Help me get back on track. Okay, this makes sense though. So Woody's my favorite pro throughout the 80s. And in 93, Matt Hoffman is going to be hosting a BS contest at his warehouse in Edmond, Oklahoma. And he's going to do the big bike show that you've probably, like the Big Air show for the first time, towed behind Steve Swope. And so we drove from Vancouver to Oklahoma, which was 44 hours each way without stopping, just gas. That's it.
Wow.
And we were in a van with 2 seats. There's 5 of us on the way there, 7 on the way back. Just ridiculous
How long
road
is the
trips, 44 hours each way, right? So while I was there, Woody Itson was there as the team manager of GT, and I'd never met him before. And at this point, I'm 22, and I should be over my fanboy sort of thing, but I wasn't. Yeah. And so I met Woody, and we kept in touch, and he was the GT team manager, and he was giving me GT stuff for the rest of the 90s whenever I needed stuff. And I used to go... I'm trying to remember how this worked out. Oh, do you know I used to work for Airwalk? No. You know that one? Okay, so in 96, I was one of the Airwalk reps that would be at all the contests. And we would set up a tent promoting Airwalk. And we'd have...
In Canada or
No, in the
North
States.
America?
The big BS contests, the B3 contests, they were called then. And while I was at one in San Diego, Woody Itson was there. And he said, hey, I want you to meet Brian Scurry. And Brian's the one who invented, among other things, the Odyssey gyro, or that system. And Brian thought I was pretty interesting, I guess, probably because I was doing my master's degree at the time, and he thought that was neat. And we kept in contact, and for the next 2-3 years, he would hire me to go to Interbike to work in his booth. And I guess he was kind of checking me out to see if I was hireable or something, but I would go to Interbike every year and wear a button-up shirt, and I would show people how to adjust SST orages, which is what it would have been at the time.
That's cool.
And then in 2000, I applied to go to graduate school again to do my PhD, and the last application was due February 15th, something like that. And so I hadn't... January 15th. And I hadn't phoned all of my friends and acquaintances, because it used to be before email and digital sort of, you actually called people on the phone to maintain your relationships. So I was calling everybody to wish them Happy New Year, and I called Brian Scurry, and he said, what if I was ready to move forward with you moving down here? I said,
2001?
2000, early 2000. I said, well, that's interesting. I'm not working. I just applied to grad school, but that sounds neat. And over the next month, we worked it out, and I flew to California and ended up staying there for about 6 months.
Where in California?
Aliso Viejo is where I lived. SST was in Laguna Hills, so South Orange County. And I worked there for 6 months, and during that time, I traveled to Taiwan for a month. I went to China for a week.
And BMX is booming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the sales at the time were, I'm not sure, but probably as high as they would get, at least in those couple of years there. And SST had OE original equipment on about 99% of the bikes, while BMX was at its height.
My Zeller's bike had an
Absolutely.
SST.
Because the SST Orage cost the same amount of money to put on a Zeller's bike as it did on the Mira Pro bike.
Yeah.
Right. So... and my business card said customer service, which sounds like I work at a mall. But if your customer is Huffy, and Huffy needs you in China tomorrow, you're on a plane to China. So I got my dream job in the bicycle industry at 27, 28 years old. But while I was there, I got an email from McGill University saying, congratulations, you've been accepted to the doctoral program. And I had to choose between staying in California and being warm and relatively wealthy, or going back to school in Montreal, which was going to be cold and poor. And for whatever reason, I took cold and poor over warm and wealthy. So I might have blown that. But I did have 6 months, and I went to Interbike, I think 6 or 7 times for SST before and afterward. So
well, it probably would have only lasted till like 2003 or 2004 anyway.
Well, the interesting thing, I would train new employees at SST even though I didn't work there. So Brian at one point hired some new people right before Interbike, and he had me do a little lecture for them, sort of the state of the industry and the detangler. And I was really worried at the time because Ruben Alcantara had switched to what we call a linear cable now.
Yeah.
Like just a straight cable.
Yeah.
And some people had gone brakeless. And Brian, at the time, and Brian's a genius of a sort, absolutely. He said that I'm not worried about this because when you're a product manager at a company and you can add one more feature to your bike for only a couple dollars, why would you not spec a bike with that? Mm-hmm. And he had a point, because I think that they stuck on bikes and people were just taking them off for a long time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't costing a lot of money to have them on the bikes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
So that was SST. I mean, the thing that you would like the most about the SST story, probably because you're a big Dave Mira fan, is one of Brian's ideas that never came to fruition was he wanted to reintroduce colors. So there's
really cool.
There's this period. Oh, you don't even know where I'm going with this yet. Although you will know once I get there. There's a period where all you could get was parts in chrome or black or silver for a long time. Which, as a shop owner, I imagine that you would love that in a sense because less SKUs and things, right? And no dead stock.
Well, not for me, but...
Well, yeah, you have your business set up different than the other people, which I admire. But so at the time, an SST Orange kit and the cables only came in black.
Yeah.
And Brian really wanted to reintroduce colors. And his idea was, and this was early, by about 3 or 4 years, he wanted to do signature model colorways.
That's so cool.
Of Oranges. And so who does he go to first? Well, who's the top pro at the time? Dave Mira. So he asked Dave, what would your signature model colorway be? And Dave says, gold, right? He's going through his gold phase, and this is before his Haro all gold bike, which is a tribute to Woody in a sense, in part. And so Brian had 10 kits of SST Orange plates. So the top plate and the bottom plate that you used to use, and the middle spinner thing, all in gold plated. And
genius.
well, I thought it was neat, but what happened is the top and the bottom plates in Taiwan, they had accidentally done the ones for the smaller ones for the quill stems,
1 inch.
So they were useless. Right now they'd be useful because people want to use quill stems again, but at the time everybody was over that sort of stuff. Definitely. So the only part that was really useful was the middle bearing unit, and so I sent 2 to Mira, so he had 2, and then out of 10 we left 1 for the shop, and I sent 7 to my friends. Just sent them gold Oranges. And I don't know where they are now, but I have one. And I've shown you that one. It's on my Haro.
Yeah.
So I have what might be the only one left, gold-plated Orange.
That's so cool.
And I don't even know if it's really gold-plated or gold-colored chrome. I think it's gold-plated. It's a better story if it's gold-plated.
Was the gold one on Mira's gold bike?
No, but I have seen pictures of Dave using a gold one before. I don't remember. Cool. I wasn't following him the way that you were following him, but he did use it at least once.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's my SST story in part.
All right, so you've spoken a lot about the media, obviously, and a couple of contests in Canada. Other than the Metro Jam that came a couple of years later and the La Revolutions, did you attend those? The La Revolutions?
The La Revs I went to because those are primo contests that were largely run by the McNeil guys, the World Bicycle Sports guys, and then they switched it to Metro Jams.
Yeah. Before that, was there anything important that you should mention contest-wise? Or?
Well, the guys in Ontario were doing their own thing. You'd have to ask Jamie Delaney and Doug Pilkey. They were up to some stuff. And I definitely jumped in the car and drove from Montreal for a day trip to go to an event with them before. There's little pockets of people that were trying to run things.
Yeah.
Right? And we were all sort of old enough in our mid-20s at that point that we had it together to be able to run things. Mm-hmm. So, and what's fun is these are the people I'm still in contact with. So Jamie Delaney, right after this, I'm going to dinner with him. 3 days ago, it was to go see Pedro, right? Like these are the friends that we're all like the 3 of us are 48 years old now. When I go to Vancouver, it's to see Jamie McIntosh and Darcy Sakuchi, and I've got my crew all over North America.
Mm-hmm. And those are the select 100 people in the 90s.
A lot of them, like I've lost contact with a lot of people. Like, here's one, Mike Escamilla. Last time I saw him was Asato's 40th birthday, and I went up to him and introduced myself and said my name, and he looked at me like, we've known each other forever. Why are you telling me like, he didn't use those words.
Yeah.
But you I would have met Mike Escamilla when he was first named Rooftop. He's like 16-year-old kid, etc. And knowing him through he's much closer friends with Enz and Asato than I am. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're acquainted. I think the last time I saw Steve Crandall was maybe 10 years ago, and you forget that you used to know these guys, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the Canadian guys I'm mostly still really tight with. Mm-hmm. I stopped going to the big American contests 18 years ago, something like that, because at some point they're just another contest, right? Plus my friends aren't in them anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't even know if Nyquist is still going to events, and I think he's the team manager for the U.S. Olympic team. He's got that nice position. But other than that, I don't know of the folks that I was acquainted to back then that are still involved. Van Homan, I think, is 40 at this point, and he would have been one of those ones that we thought of as kids. Yeah. A lot of these guys that we thought of, Chris Silva, Canadian icon from your perspective, right? He's 35 years old, so he's 13 years younger than me. So when I met Silva, he was a kid, and now he's a full of bearded man. So,
yeah.
So,
what do you remember about the La Revolution?
The La Revolution contests were initially done through Tip Plus and Greg Walsh, who worked for them, and Greg had his own brand for a while.
Coalition?
Yeah, Coalition. That's it. And he was trying to do them in different countries in North America, and then Jay and the World Bicycle Sports 10-Pack McNeil folks, they would have agreed to help doing the one in Toronto. I think that's how it happened. The first La Rev in Toronto?
Or just in general, yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember when the first La Revs in the States might have been. But I know that I think there were 2 La Revolutions, and then it was Metro Jam for 3 or 4 years.
And those La Revolution ramps are the Metro Jam?
Metro Jam
ramps in Barrie now.
Yeah, Mike Heaton got them, right?
Yeah. So those must have been the Metro Jam ramps, because the La Revolution ramps probably belong to maybe Tip Plus, possibly.
Yeah, I don't know how that worked. I know that Brent Oswald made a lot of ramps for the Metro Jam folks. And him and Jay were tight back then. They're roughly the same age. I think Brent's 2 years older than me. Jay's 6 months older than me. So we're all within about a year or so. But they were both vert riders. And they have, back then, they had a similar disposition, right? A lot of respect for each other, for the kind of folks that they were. And so Brent Oswald made the ramps. And I think there were 2 sets of them. There was a set that went to Europe, I think, for the backyard things as well, which they just brought back, I see. I think last week or a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
And you went to all of them, like, till the end of the Metro Jams, or just most of them? Or?
Most. They also did Metro Jams in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time I saw Mike Hoder, he was just a kid, and if I remember correctly, he was flying out of the hockey arena over the boards and landing in the Zamboni area. That's my memory. I only remember, I think, 2 things about that contest, and that was one of them.
Did you ever go to the Street Justice?
No, that's Bernie's stuff. So 1664, eventually Brink. 1664 started initially by Steve Roy and Bernie Tomaszewski, however you pronounce Bernie's last name. And then Steve left pretty quickly and Bernie took over. And the Nelson contests that I was doing with Rob Siggety were the biggest events in Canada for a long time. And then the La Rev and then Metro, there was that sort of wing. And then there was the Street Justice contests. And I was in the middle of doing my PhD, so
And you were also in California probably also at the time.
I think that came later. I mean, we did the Nelson contest up to 2003.
Oh, okay.
So somehow I was still coming back. And I didn't live in BC for a lot of the time. I would fly from Montreal to run a contest, and I think we charged next to nothing. It was such a, I mean, I started the chat today saying the thing that I like to ride isn't important. It's about hanging out with people, right?
Yeah.
And so even very young, I realized contests are not really what I want to do or be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get people together to have a good time. We'll call it a contest so I can get prizes.
Yeah.
Right? And if I have to, if Etnies through Time Bomb in Vancouver, if they want to support my event and say, we'll give shoes to the top 3 people, well, then I better figure out who the top 3 people are. I'll play the game enough to get the stuff to give to the people. But it was all just a party, right?
Sure. Or
so
a jam.
It was a jam. Yes, it was a jam, but it was something else. The first
together.
Nelson, yeah, it was family reunion is what it was, and you'd have new family come to your family reunion, if that makes any sense. So, Shad Johnson came to maybe the second or third Nelson contest the first time I met him, and
He talks about it a lot.
Yeah, we didn't know him, but he came, so he's family. There's no vetting. There's no sort of we'll see if you qualify, see if you're cool enough. Back then it was, oh, you ride? You made an effort? You're part of the crew, right? And Shad and I are still good buddies. He's sending me stuff right now, actually, from his shop. So he's super good. I'm supposed to be writing stuff for Snakebite, but I'm 2 years behind now. I want to write. Problem is, I want to write things that articles that nobody should want to read.
Yeah.
Like, so one of the things.
The history of basic.
Well, I mean, Cecil and Shad are doing basic. They've done some stuff on basic, and that's fine. That's cool. And I don't know my basic stuff as well as I probably could, even though they're really good friends of mine, because I was busy going to grad school at the time. But like, for example, I really want to write an article about coaster brakes,
Cool.
right? Because all the kids are on free coasters, but they don't know where this comes from. And I had someone last night at Joyride say to me, so, okay, you pedal backwards, but when you roll backwards and you don't pedal backwards, it's like a coaster, right? It's precisely like a coaster because it's a coaster brake. That's what that is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I just figured out how to get a 9-tooth coaster brake together. I think I showed you that in the spring, right?
Yeah.
So there's about a dozen of us now, or no, less, it'd be about 8 or 9 people that have 9-tooth coaster brakes, which for those 9 people that care is super, super rad, and no one else cares. And that's the kind of stuff I want to write about now.
That's awesome. You should do that.
Well, no one's going to read it, but,
Yeah, and probably the old school guys won't read it either.
Well, the guys that quit in 88, I don't think that they... imagine skipping 30 years of something and then coming back.
For sure.
And a big part of that, I think, is you want to study it enough to know it and then be part of a crew that knows stuff. But they have a 30-year gap in their understanding.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the fun thing about watching your Instagram feed is watching some of the older bikes that you put together to keep these people happy, which is super rad. But I'm like, why would anybody put that much money into that bike, right? Because they'll find I get if it's one of the peak bikes, like the ones that if you only had the money to make anything.
Yeah.
And I also get that you couldn't afford that, so you got the bike that your parents could afford and you want that one, right? So that, for example, the Hutch Trickstar was not just for me, but for a lot of people, like a pinnacle thing, right? Hutch's brand was very much like chrome plated and it's hard to explain without seeming silly. It was next level. Like GT was rad, it was an American made and chrome plated, etc. But Hutch just seemed like, their hubs were magnesium with titanium axles. Like it just was up
hard
there.
to get that stuff?
I didn't see a lot of Hutch stuff myself, so it might have been hard. They might have not had great distribution. I don't know. I was just a kid at the time.
Yeah.
But so you had Hutch Trick Stars, like American made, and eventually went the Japanese made. But then when Hutch started making, I think you might have one. Do you have a Hutch Windstyler?
Yeah.
Okay, so Hutch Windstyler is their cheap Taiwan bike,
Yeah.
right? That people could afford, which is rad. But it wasn't the one you'd want. So when people find a Windstyler frame and then get it powder coated for $300 and put $1,000 or $2,000 worth of parts into it, they have really tricked out a not very good bicycle. No disrespect.
Yeah.
Right? I get going for the peak stuff and the stuff that you had, but the people that just want to have some old bike so they can be part of the gang,
Yeah.
then you're just a consumer.
Yeah.
You're not a part of it.
Yeah.
And I collecting. I don't collect. I have some interesting things, but I don't collect because I want to do it. I want to be involved in it. And if you go in BMX museum, for example, there's a couple people that ride and there's a lot of people that collect. And to each their own. You do your own thing. That's cool. But BMX as a culture to me has always been about doing it. And yes, there's the commercial side, and you talk to me long enough, you'll know that I want titanium parts and I want purple anodized this. So I'm still a bit of a trick star in my head. But if it would go my direction, if I would like, and never do this because the culture's not set up this way, it shouldn't be about buying stuff, right?
Yeah.
It should just be like, for example, what brands do you sell right now? Like the main 2 or 3?
Cult, Haro.
We the people, right? Okay, yeah. Let's take We the People. I'm a fan of We the People. A We the People at any price point, I bet you an $800 We the People is all I would ever need to ride.
Mm-hmm.
That would be fine, functionally fine, right? So people should just be content with that and not have them tricked out the way my bike is, right? So if you go to Joyride, for example, there's the park kids at Joyride that have titanium everything, like I do, so I have to keep putting myself in this thing. But then it's not as accessible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It should be about getting a good quality bike that is safe under enough people that they participate. Yeah. It's participation over performance or excellence. It should be good enough just to be in the room. You should get a high five for you doing the best you can do, if that makes sense.
For sure.
So
after the early 2000s, where were you in the mid-2000s? Oh, you were still in Montreal.
I was in Montreal, and I was like an elder to the ugly ass bikes folks.
Yeah.
So when I saw Jason Herman the other day, he popped out of his car because I was early. He popped out. He was Dr. Wade Nelson. He was so excited, and he says, "You don't look any different than you did 15 years ago." And I realized that I was important to those kids to support them, not for riding, but just like believing in them and supporting them. And I would have events at Ugly Ass Bikes that I would put together, King of Quebec contest, etc., to support that crew, if that makes sense. So that's what I did in the mid 2000s. But at the same time, I was writing my PhD on BMX, which was the very short version of it is I looked at Ride US magazine, Ride UK magazine, and Chase magazine from fall 99 to fall of 2003. So I had however many magazines that was, and then I did sort of critical analysis and content analysis of I followed 4 different pros and watched how their coverage developed. So it was Dustin Gunther as sort of the emerging pro guy, a Canadian from Vancouver.
He wrote for We the People?
Yes, at one point he did.
Yeah.
And then Jason Enns, Mira, and Ali Witten.
Wow.
And so I had one representative from the UK, Ali Witten.
Yeah.
I had arguably the best person at the time, Dave Mira. And then I had Jason Enns as a Canadian representative. And they all had lots of coverage in there. And then I threw in Dustin Gunther as someone coming up. Right. And so I had sort of withdrawn somewhat from BMX in order to work on BMX. So it's still my everything. It's still my life. And then I think the last time I shot anything for a video was also 2005 because Liam liked that I did weird old things.
Yeah.
So I was talking about Chris Silva last night was riding a front brake 4-peg full setup bike.
Yeah.
And he was trying tail whip nose picks on brakes for the first time. He's got them as foot jams, but not with brakes. And it sparked their memory that the last time I pulled a tail whip nose pick was at Ugly Ass Bikes, and Liam was taping.
He had a DVD.
Yeah, I'm in that. I'm in that like 3 or 4 times, something like that.
There's a Harvester ad in that.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Do you have
to look that up. Yeah, it's called.
It's awesome.
I don't remember what it's called. Just the Ugly Ass Bikes DVD. But yeah, I do have that one.
Yeah, I had an ad in that.
So yeah, so that was mid 2000s, and then 2007, I finished the PhD and was hired by York University. So I moved to Toronto. So I was here for 3 years. And I lived with Harley Haskett, who's one of my dear friends, and he worked for World Bicycle Sports, McNeil, 10-Pack, etc. We're still tight. We're hanging out. We're having dinner with Jamie in an hour or something like that. And I rode mostly with, remember the Wallace Emerson kids?
Yep.
So that was my new crew. Wherever I go, I adopt a crew.
The wooden ramps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, Flarick? You know Flarick? Eric Pillsbury. So he was 12 or 13 at the time.
Yeah.
And I gave him and his brother bikes and bought them helmets.
Wow.
Because they didn't have a lot of resources at the time, and they were the sweetest kids. And the Wallace Emerson Park, which is, in my mind, it's in Little Portugal. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And so there's these young Portuguese kids that didn't have a lot of money, and these sort of wealthy people from the suburbs were infiltrating and riding ramps in their neighborhoods, but they couldn't play. And you should be able to play.
Yeah.
So Eric would wait until someone was having a break and then really sweetly ask if he could borrow their bike. So long story short, I ended up making sure that he and his brother had bikes and helmets.
That's awesome.
And it was tapping into the resources I had. So I would call up Jamie McIntosh and say, yeah, I got these kids I need to take care of. You're going to help me help them. So I would use my friends to help kids, right? Mm. And then I moved to Winnipeg in 2010. And Winnipeg, which is, have you been to Winnipeg before?
So I just know Corey Beale.
Yes, I know Corey as well. I don't know him as well as you probably do, but we're acquainted. Winnipeg is, as most of Canada, built on Indigenous land, of course, right? And there's a skateboard park at the Forks there, which is a very important place where the rivers meet, okay? And there's this young guy, young Indigenous fellow that was riding like a Sears bike with a quill stem, and he just wanted to be involved so much, and I liked him. And so I called up Jamie McIntosh and I said, I want to help this kid out. Do you have like a $300 red line or something like that? And he said, well, we've Harrison
Boyd.
Harrison.
Yeah.
I can't remember Harrison's last name. Is it
Boyce or Boyd?
Boyce. I think it's Harrison Boyce. I heard Boyd and it's changed my mind on it. But yes, Boyce. Harrison's famous blue and orange bike, I think it was like teal and orange, looked like taxis in Toronto. Remember what I'm talking about?
Was it a McNeil?
Yeah, it was a McNeil. It was sitting there in the 10-Pack offices.
Gary Young frame? I
think so. It was sitting in the McNeil offices, and Jamie said, well, we've got Harrison's bike. It doesn't have a brake, but, we'll put a brake on it. So I had Jamie send Harrison's old bike.
That's awesome.
And Jamie and I, and 10-Pack, gifted this young kid a bike, and I got him another helmet. I always get him helmets, right? And made sure the brakes worked and tricked it all out, and then that bike got stolen, so I got him another We the People bike. And so that's sort of what you can do as an elder if you're motivated is
that's awesome.
Take care of other folks to let them play. I think that's the important thing.
That's cool.
Everybody should have a chance to do it.
Yeah. So. That's a nice story. That's cool.
Thank you.
And okay, so you lived there. How was the weather?
Winnipeg? I'm on tape, so I will say Winnipeg is a wonderful place with good humans.
Okay.
The Forks Park is the perfect retirement park for someone in their 40s that wants to carve around and not hit wedges.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the warmest scene of people in Winnipeg. Lovely humans.
You never lived in Alberta? Because you seem like you've lived everywhere.
No, I've lived in 5 provinces and I've lived in Southern California. But I have not lived... I had a job offer to teach at the University of Calgary at one point, but I'd said yes to University of New Brunswick, so I didn't go.
Mm-hmm.
But I have really good friends in Alberta as well. Steve Roy and Dan Rigby, who are ex-pro Flatlanders.
Actually,
and really good human beings.
I have a customer who, I think it's Steve Roy, but he has Steve Roy's old Basic. And then I actually sent you a photo on Instagram. I don't know if you ever got it. Someone had your old bike.
Really?
From...
my black Basic?
No.
We'll have to send it to me some other time.
Yeah, it was...
I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll send you to... Someone posted, this is Wade Nelson's bike.
Really?
I'm
not very good at Instagram because I have a flip phone.
That's right.
And so...
Yeah. So you can't get messages.
No. So recently...
You have to check online or on a computer.
I have to go on someone's phone to check my DMs. So this month I've had Instagram for 3 years, and just about 3 weeks ago I looked at my DMs for the first
How
time.
many?
50 or 60 or something like that. And some of them are time sensitive, like I need you to get back. No.
Yeah.
So I don't want to live with a smartphone.
Yep.
I'm a professor of social media in a sense. I teach communication studies. And one of the first things I tell the students, the 18-year-olds, is you really don't need a smartphone, and you might want to think about whether you want to just have a flip phone. And it's not being, I'm not anti-technology, etc., but I mean, you must have known that you're a little bit older than the folks coming up, but I don't know, it's been very good for people to be constantly monitoring and the anxiety and...
For sure.
You go to Joyride and everybody's trying to document stuff rather than hang out and have a good time. And I mean, they're having a good time with documenting. That's cool, but it's not the same thing.
For sure.
So I'd like to see which bike that was. It might be my... Cecil made me a custom Basic Sluggo.
I don't know if it was a Basic.
I've had a lot of bikes, so...
Yeah. Yeah.
Mostly McNeil's lately.
Yeah. What's your favorite McNeil frame you ever rode?
Well, the one I'm on right now that you've seen, I had a powder-coated purple sparkle.
Is it a Loden or a Barado?
That's a Loden.
But I like a small seat post?
No, I have one of each. I have a black one with a small seat post, and I have burnt orange? No, something red, but it looks orange to me.
Yeah.
Darcy says it's red, and I think it's orange.
Yeah, it's like
might be a cilantro thing.
Red.
Yeah,
it's like fire hydrant red.
Matte fluorescent red, but it looks orange to me. So that one's now purple. That's the one that's downstairs right now.
Yeah.
And that bike's perfect for me. Kink makes a bike called the Titan 2 in a 20-inch top tube, 220, no point anything, just 20. And I could switch to that frame if I needed to, but I also don't wear out stuff anymore. I don't think I've broken anything in decades. I still ride hard, but I don't break anything because I don't put myself in a position to fall.
Yeah.
So did I fall last night? No.
Do you wear like ass pads and hip pads and stuff too?
I have, what are the new G-Form? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
I have G-Form combo knees and shins. I have the butt pads and I have the elbow pads. And then I wear one of those Bell helmets that squish when you put them on your head.
Yeah.
Which I don't really like, and they've been discontinued.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel like I have pads on, and yet I'm completely wrapped in pads. It's wonderful. I also have a full set of Pro Design pads that I got at the very last BS contest in Florida before it went to ESPN. And I bought them from the Pro Design guy. And so the elbow pads are that thick around your elbows.
Any hammer stuff?
I did. I had a couple pair of shin guards, and I had neon green knee ones when I rode Pro Flatland. But I don't know where they went. That's 30 years ago now. So
yeah, cool.
I rode without pads for always with a helmet. I have a good Darcy Sakuchi helmet story. Have I told you this?
No.
So, 1993, we're riding my backyard ramp. I was living at home. I was 22, and I had a backyard mini ramp. So it was a spine with 6 foot on either side, and 4 foot in the middle, if I remember correctly, in a deck. And I popped out, and I was wearing all pads but no helmet, which makes no sense. But I would have had gloves, elbow pads, knees, shins, high top sneakers, everything, but no helmet. And I popped out to the top of the deck, and I'm catching my breath. And Darcy, in his infinite wisdom, is at 20 years old, he would have been at the time or something like that. He says, "How much is your student loan?" $12,000 at that point, a couple of years in. He says, "And you don't wear a helmet?" And in Darcy's mind, I'd invested that much in my head, I should protect my investment. And I couldn't argue with it. It was smart.
Yeah.
So from 93 till now, I will not ride without a helmet. I own like 5 or 6 helmets. But Darcy didn't. And the funny part to me is that Darcy didn't value his head. He valued my head because I'd invested money in it. He didn't realize how valuable Darcy is.
Yeah.
So I thank him every time I see him, which is probably about once a year. I get out to Vancouver to visit him and his family. Because I've hit my head probably 20 plus times since then.
Yeah.
The last bad one was at Woodward West. I don't know if I've told you that story before.
You went for the reunion?
I've been to 5 of the 11 old school reunions. And Steve Swope, who runs them, who's amazing, amazing fellow, first person to slide on pegs. I don't know if you know that before. So there's a moment where people would go up on a vert ramp and stall on their pegs and drop in. Steve was the one who carved in and slid first. And then eventually Matt Hoffman, his best friend, tried it down rails.
Yeah.
But Steve Swope's the first person to actually grind. So Steve's been running these old school reunions they've been 11. If there's a 12th one, it'll be this May. And at the second one, they're invite only, and you have to be over 40 something, and that age moves every year, so you will never be able to go because you're not. I think about Enz's age is about 43 or 42, and it just keeps moving. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I was riding with. I was riding a kink at the time, a white kink. I just put it together, first 4 hours on the bike kind of thing. And I'd switched to Animal transparent purple pedals, which I think are Hamilton pedals, but transparent purple. Okay. And I've been running MKS graphites or KHE copies of graphites for 25 years. But I tried these new ones because they look nice. And Fudger from Ride was videotaping. And he taped me doing a couple tricks. I did a bar spin fly out to what Drew calls a dork wheelie, like a peg wheelie, like rocket manual we used to call it, right? So like bar spin fly out, land on your rear peg, manual.
Rocket manual.
Yeah, rocket manual. And then just before I dropped in, grabbed the rear brake and lawnmower on the way in. So I did that a couple times, pulled it. Fudger had that. And then they have this ski jump thing that goes, if I remember correctly, 6 foot, 1 foot deck, 4 foot wall, 1 foot deck, and then a landing on the other side. So it's like a ski jump. And I was doing nose picks up and over, like grab your front brake, stall, and over. Yeah. And he caught that and he liked it. And then he went to tape someone else. And I was so psyched to get footage for the first time in 15 years or something that I thought, I'm going to work on this. And Rob Nolly and Rob Siggety used to do Canadian nose picks and spin the bars on the way in. Right, so the last second chuck the bars with the brakes, and I thought that I could jump on this thing and spin the bars on the way in. So I was trying to do X-ups to get a feel for something, and I woke up 40 minutes later. Don't know what happened. Mm-hmm. From what I'm told, I dropped in with full front brake lock and went straight to head. Uh-huh. And so Darcy saved my life in a sense. Maybe I would have figured out the helmet thing by then, but wearing the helmet saved me. I tore my knee open, big wound. And in the States, when you fall, they don't rush you to the hospital. They make sure they don't have to take you to the hospital, right? Because it's thousands and thousands of dollars. Us, as Canadians, if we fall, we go get fixed. Yeah. We don't worry about these sorts of things, right? So my dear friends that I knew from Oregon that happened to be there, they watched out for me, but they didn't take me to the hospital. And I'm concussed, messed up concussed. And I was on a 2-minute concussion loop where you ask the same 2 minutes of questions over again and then you reboot. And I did that for what I'm told is 40 minutes. Yeah. And when I came back, it was like an old TV turning on where it's, right? And all I see is a banner on the side of the launch box that says Woodward West. And I go, okay, Woodward West, I'm in California? No idea how I got to California, etc. And long story short, I didn't even get to a hospital, even though, and I'm bleeding profusely from the knee because it's split open. And I stayed there for a couple of days. Steve Swope took me aside and said, "Yeah, you're not riding anymore." Actually, it was really cool because he said, and you have to keep in mind that when you think Steve Swope, you think Matt Hoffman. Okay. So when Steve Swope says you've got a concussion and you're not riding for a month First, he said, you can't ride anymore this weekend. Okay. And for a month after, I went, okay. He says, 2 months is better. You go, okay, Steve. Yeah, who's going to know more about concussions than Steve Swope in a sense, right?
Sure.
So, and I lost 6 or 8 months worth of memories previously, just gone. And so there's, to this day, there'll be a movie that I will have seen that I don't remember seeing because it happened in that 6 months. And for the next 4 months after that, I would, if you and I had lunch on a Thursday and then I ran into you on a Friday, I'd be, Ed, I haven't seen you forever. We really should have lunch. Couldn't make new short-term memories, so I couldn't make long-term memories. And I just signed with the University of Winnipeg to be a professor. So I needed my brain to work.
Yeah.
Sure enough, by the time I got back to September, this happened April 2nd, I got to September 2010, my brain worked again. But, so the learning moment there is, you're 39 years old at the time, leave the bar spins out of nose picks to the kids. So, not allowed to hit my head anymore.
Yeah. I think I have 3 more questions.
Sure.
We're running out of time. I'll ask you one question.
Well, ask me all 3 and I'll go faster.
Sure.
Speed round.
All right. Where do you want to travel that's not in North America, if you do? And with your bike.
Oh, with my bike?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I've actually been to all 7 continents already, and all 50 states and all the provinces and all the territories. So I've done a lot of traveling. And I've ridden my bike as far north as Yellowknife and as far south as Ushuaia, Argentina, which is almost the very tip of South America. Where would I go to ride a bike? I don't have anything in particular. That new Park City, Utah Woodward they opened this weekend looks pretty good. I'm sort of hoping that Steve Swope decides that the next old school reunion would be there. There's also and I'm not like a Woodward promoting sort of person, but as you get older, to have it all in one place and luxurious seems a little better. I think they've got one in Mexico that looks good.
Yeah.
When I've brought up the idea of having a Nelson reunion event in Nelson, BC, some of my friends have said, well, why don't we just go to Woodward in Mexico? Because by the time you get in your late 40s, maybe you've got your stuff together enough that you can afford a $3,000 vacation in the way that you couldn't before. Where would you go?
Australia, maybe?
Oh, that'd be good. I've ridden in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Australia would be all right. Not the problem with Australia, but the reality of Australia is it's this big round continent that's got cities on the coast. So New Zealand's fun because it's 2 islands that you can sort of hop all over the place, but there's a lot of desert in Australia.
Yeah.
But I met through Drew, was it Andy something? B? Andrew.
Oh, I think
What's
I know
his
him.
name? He was a nice guy. He's blowing up. He's fun to watch on Instagram.
He's not South African?
Sorry?
Is he South African?
No, this is Aussie Andy somebody. I don't remember.
There's a couple
He's
South
cool.
Africans at BMX now that go to Joyride.
Yeah, I think what I want at this point is to be around friends. I'd like to go with my friends somewhere and ride.
Yeah,
that sounds... Because it was just me and my bike. Then I'm riding, but I'm not having the friendly part of it.
So you can meet the locals too.
I do like people. What else you got?
Last 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you can think of anything else, what is your favorite movie and favorite band other than The Cult?
My favorite film is Happy Feet, the musical penguin animated film.
Interesting.
I could give you an hour on why it's the best movie ever, but I won't. And my favorite music... Well, whenever I finish writing something, I put on Ramones' Greatest Hits as a celebration. My favorite band of the last 20 years is probably The Hives out of Sweden. There's also a band called Electric Six out of Detroit that I like very much. I think they're out of Detroit. I think that's... I mean, I could do this for days.
For sure.
I have 600 CDs, but I haven't bought any new ones for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
You want me to say Metallica?
No.
Your hat says you want me to say Metallica.
Okay, and then the last thing, is there anything very important about Canadian BMX history that we missed
So we
out?
haven't covered? Oh, probably lots. We've neglected whole regions of the country. Um, Let me think.
Any
So much.
like big things in history or that you were a part of, or
Well, I it's the kind of thing that in about 20 minutes I'll have a perfect answer for. Um, See, where have I lived? I've lived Vancouver, Winnipeg, Ontario, Montreal, St. John, New Brunswick. Um, New Brunswick's not happening. Um, I wish it would. It's interesting. BMX. I think there's a no, because there's small towns that there's one person that rides, but it seems to me that out of St. John, there isn't. I haven't found any 48-year-olds to hang out with, which means that either the people that did do it in the 80s didn't stick with it or aren't really into it, or maybe it never happened. I'm not sure. I was lucky to grow up in Vancouver in that we had 2 cement skate parks by the time I was ready to ride skate parks. So the Sealin Bowl, the snake run in Vancouver, you might have seen a video of before. I was going there in 87. We would get in the car and bring our bikes from Langley because it was quite far. But then now they have maybe 80 cement parks in Vancouver. I mean, Southern Ontario's got plenty now. I don't know. I'll have to think about that
Burnside?
one. Sorry?
Burnside?
I went to Burnside once in 93 or 94. We were coming back from a BS contest at Moreno Valley in California, and I sold my frame while I was down there. So when we got to Burnside, I had a box full of parts that weren't a frame. So I didn't get to ride Burnside.
Oh. Well, good thing, because the skaters probably would want to kill you. So.
Well, I skate too, so
That's right.
Here's a trick. Maybe this is how we should end this. One, everybody should get along. And I don't mean that in just sort of a hippie way. There's no reason not to get along. The problem at skate parks isn't BMX versus skateboard versus scooters. It's youth, right? So although, the scooter kids, because they're 10 years old and they come from the suburbs and they're just little kids, right? They don't have within their culture etiquette.
Yeah.
Or at least I haven't seen it yet.
Etiquette is a very important
But I
thing.
think beyond etiquette, it's also young people are like really young people that are new at it don't know to look both ways.
For sure.
Don't know to watch for lines and things, right? So when I roll up to a skate park, one I've never been before, I usually have a bike and a skateboard with me because I can do both. And since I don't know what the vibe is, I skate for 20 minutes. And everybody there goes, okay, he skates. He's cool. He's all right. And there's a couple, I do a couple things, like simple things, but like, okay, yeah, that guy's rad. He's cool. And then once I've got everybody on my side, I drop in on the bike, and they've already decided they like me.
Yeah.
So then it's cool. What I don't do is roll up to a park and act like I belong there, and if I scratch things with your pegs, that's your fault. So that's a different sort of etiquette, but it's also a coping strategy. All right. So when I moved to Toronto the last time, a year and a half ago, I would go to Vanderhoof, skate for 20 minutes, shake hands with everybody, meet everybody. We're all buddies. What kind of wheels you running, et cetera, et cetera. Then I ride. And then, like I said, I've already won them over, hopefully, at that point.
Yeah.
And the people you can't win over, there's nothing you're going to be able to do. Because part of their identity is being that jerk that's mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome.
We good?
Yeah.
Congratulations on your first podcast.
Thank you for being the first guest.
Oh, you're welcome. I can't believe you had emailed me about a week and a half ago and said, hey, would you do this? And maybe next time you're in town. I said, oh, we're going to be there in a couple days. So you must have had to rush to get all this together, too.
It's been like 2 months in the making.
Wow. Well, I'm honored to be the first. It'll also be the mark of the worst production values because it'll always get better after this. So what'll happen is you'll have someone on like Silva, and the young kids will watch, and it'll be so amazing. They'll have all the views, and then they'll go back to watch and they, oh, we want to watch this one. So my views are going to be eventually so low compared to everybody else's. So
Well, I have 37,000 subscribers on YouTube.
all right, that's it. Your business, the way you do business is so fascinating to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think the hustle that you've got going on, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful, it's fake kind of way. I'm not a big fan of business for the sake of business, that sort of thing. But part of what you do, which is part of your business, and we've talked about this before, is someone comes in and buys new pedals, a chain, and tires, and you post up something on Instagram, and they feel like they're part of a community.
For sure.
Which is cool. And as long as you're cool with this and don't exploit this more than you have to,
Definitely.
you're building a community that will help your business rather than building a business and maybe it'll help the community.
Yeah.
So if you keep the kids first,
Yeah.
that's something you can sleep well at night with, I think. So,
For sure.
so cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers.
All the best.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sweet.